Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this Wednesday afternoon I am delighted to be joined by John Hughes and Patrick McGilp for the Wednesday Bulletin. We are going live on various platforms. We're on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitch, and our newest friend, Instagram. We're on the gram. Patrick, you're one of the kids. You know how that works. I don't. But we're on there. We're on there. So welcome to Celtic State of Mind. If you've only started watching on the new platform, delighted to have the pair of us back. We move into the split fixtures, John. We know, obviously, how that's going to pan out in terms of the teams we're playing and when. Our first one up, Dundee on Sunday. That will follow the Rangers game. They will be playing St Mirren away at 12:30. We will be playing at 3 o'clock. How are you feeling about this weekend, John?
Well, funny enough, I contrary to my nature, was, as I do when I come on here, try to be positive. Last week when Kevin was being a bit negative and saying, basically, we might struggle in these last few games to get it over the line, and I was like, no, we've turned a corner. Everything's going to be great. We're going to canter it to the line, so we are. And all my anxiety is back. And that's basically the takeaway from that. Is just I am now as anxious as I was before, and I don't know, man. If people can target those obvious weaknesses, and they are obvious weaknesses, if people can just target us that way and focus on that, then we've got potentially get some real problems. Now we've obviously got some pretty decent solutions at the other end of the pitch, but we have some real problems in defence. So I don't know, an answer to your question, anxious is how I feel.
I go on about this dial when I'm talking to Kevin Graham about his confidence dial or his belief dial with regards to Brendan Rodgers. And I think this season the dial has been going from end to end when it comes to the Celtic team, Patrick. John raises a point there about Aberdeen. We've gone in there. Yeah, I know it's a cup game. Anything can happen. One-off, romance of the cup, all that kind of stuff. All the cliches get rolled out for these types of games. But the 9th best team in Scotland really gave us a game. Could have nicked it. And they did show quite a lot of our defensive frailties. Now, when I watched the game, what I seen was the fact that Aberdeen were able to figure out how to play against Carter Vickers, how to get between Carter Vickers and his partner, or Alistair Johnson, get in between them, get on the wrong side of them, play off the shoulder. Miovski gave them it tight until he went off. After the game, I was going on about how much of a titan Carter Vickers was. And since the game, everybody who's watched the game says I was talking nonsense and that Carter Vickers was actually quite poor. What was your take on it, Patrick?
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you, Paul, because I actually didn't see the game live. I had to watch it back. I was at the racing down in Ayr, and by the sounds of things, I missed an absolute classic. But I've obviously watched the highlights back and delighted to have gone through. I mean, when it comes to Carter Vickers, you can't really hold him at fault for anything the last 3 seasons. Didn't think he looked too impressive for the first goal. Second and third, I think, comes down to the left-hand side, either Taylor or Scales, probably more Scales. So, I mean, for the 120 minutes, I can't assess Carter Vickers' performance as well as you two can. But, I mean, he's been a rock for Celtic for 3 years. If they found a way to play against him and other teams managed to copy that, that's obviously a worry going forward. But I like to think come the summer, and I'm sure it's something we're going to talk about, I like to think come the summer, he's going to have a better defensive partner coming in, because I think, for me personally, from what I've seen, from what I've heard and read, I think the Scales experiment's got to end at the absolute latest this summer. Whether he plays the next 6 games, I mean, I wouldn't play him, but I know Narovski isn't. He's not convinced everyone yet, but I think Narovski's a better option than Liam Scales, and I think if we can get over the line the next 6 games, going into next season, our recruitment needs to be a lot better. And I think next season, with a more solid defensive partner, someone like Starfelt that you can trust and rely on, hopefully they won't get exploited like that again.
Well, that one goal, the thing about it was, Patrick, he was at fault for that first goal, but there was a whole load of other things that didn't result in goals, which were very similar to that.
Right.
But even for that first goal, I was looking back on it, and they have played the ball through between them. But what's happened prior to that is Liam Scales and Alistair Johnson are in sort of a line, raggedy line, you might call it. And Carter Vickers has dropped deep with Miovski and tried to match his run and subsequently played him onside. But then you think, why did he do that? And I would suggest why he did that was because he's not confident that they would have held that line. He's not confident that that line is going to play him offside. So, maybe there's an excuse for him there, but certainly they targeted him. They targeted that space between Scales and him. And obviously they were confident Miovski had the beating of him on that turn. And they were confident enough they kept trying to play that ball. So, yeah, in terms of Scales and the experiment ending, it's certainly not ending this season. There's no chance he's getting dropped from Miovski at this point. And that's been demonstrated by the fact he came straight back into the side. Which is interesting because one of the other areas that we're really weak on, as I'm sure we'll come to, is at that back post. And Miovski is, by all accounts, a much better player in the air. Scales is better on the deck. So the manager clearly, it's very clear Scales is the main man. It's very clear at this point. So Miovski's not getting back in. And obviously, subconsciously, you'll be thinking, 30 seconds after we brought Miovski on at the weekend, they scored their goal. So there's a game management decision, Brendan. A cracker, take off Wee Forest, bring on Miovski, 30 seconds later, goal. I think Scales is where he is. As you say, it might, you're hoping for a better quality. Those other two goals, for instance, at the back post, everybody knows that Taylor's a liability at the back post. They target the back post. That's obviously what they were doing. But the problem is Scales isn't brilliant in the air either, and especially once it gets over his head, Taylor's never. Both of those goals, Taylor saw the man on the run and cut inside Scales, left him to it, cut inside him, and left the man behind him because he was too far off him. And then he's throwing his hands up like, oh, no, how did that happen? It happened because of you. That's how it happened. We've got a real problem there. And if people target us, for instance, in the Champions League, it didn't take them long to work out on the pitch. People were pinging balls in there all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know why we don't see more of it, quite frankly, in the league. It's a real problem, and neither of them seem capable of resolving it. So, is the manager going to change his mind at this point, knowing that that's been a problem all this time? I doubt it. Or we could just bring on our other left back. What's his name again? Never signed Dio.
Yeah, he's sitting on a bench in Brazil at the moment. Our other left back. But John, I think you're spot on, right? Because we're in this world now where it's not the elite teams that do video analysis on their opponents. Every team does that. So Aberdeen sitting there looking at how Celtic have been broken down this season would clearly see, John, exactly what you've said there. Target their left-hand side of the fence. And I'll tell you, when Dyson Maeder's not in the team, it's even weaker because he does give them a bit of assurance, and he comes back and his defensive work is brilliant and he's got that engine. You take him out the side and whoever's playing on the left-hand side is a downgrade defensively to Maeda. That we don't have a winger that can cover that kind of defensive work rate and everything that Maeda brings to the team. So I think we're extremely weak there, John, but I share your concerns. I don't think we've got the options to change it between now and the end of the season. Like you say, we don't have another left back for a start.
But the other concern is just pointed out there, sorry, it's all over my notes as well. Alistair Johnson, again, both of those goals, he was miles out of position for the Parma one. Maybe you don't blame him for that because one of the most dangerous ways, you lose the ball in transition like that, and that's always going to be dangerous. But both those crosses came from his side, and the second ball, he just stopped. He didn't stop while getting it in. He just didn't stop him. So I would say our back four at the moment, Alistair Johnson's been tremendous going forward. absolutely tremendous, but he has been poor or verging on poor for a lot of games this season. So our back four, it's really the thing that really worried me was because if CCV takes a bad turn, we're in serious bother. We've got nothing there at all. So we need CCV to get his head up and get back to his imperious best, and hopefully drag the rest of them over the line.
There was a game last season, and Callum McGregor, I can't remember specifically what the game was, but he misplaced a pass and we conceded a goal. And after the game, Ange Postecoglou was asked about it, and he says he's allowed to misplace a pass every 5 seasons, right? That was his response. So I think I've been blinded by the level of Carragher's performance. And then after the game, all I was remembering was the one that he cleared off the line, the amount of headers that he was winning. He won a lot of headers. And then obviously the one that they were all crying for a penalty, whereby he's basically thought himself that he's given away a penalty, but he was involved in that stramash, to use a good Scottish commentary term. And after the game, I just thought, he was throwing his body about and all the rest of it. But, you take a step back, John, if after 3 or 4 days, every single person you speak to says, no, Paul, he was rotten. And you say, well, maybe I was watching a different game. But I take on point Lucy, who says CCV can't be perfect all the time. Absolutely. It's a one-off, I would suggest, Lucy. And I don't think it helps if you've got 2 guys on your left-hand side who are not covering themselves in glory. And then, as John says, even Johnson defensively hasn't been as solid as we would have liked.
That's what I said to my ex-wives. Just can't be perfect all the time,
Well, wives. Oh, my God. Right, Stevie Boy 7. This is an interesting one because nobody is mentioning any other centre-halves here, right? Can Nawrocki defend headers? Because that's our weakness in defence, especially after the weekend. Right, so we're no longer talking about Stephen Welsh. We're no longer talking about Gustav Lagerberg. We're just talking about Nawrocki. Now, John has already said, and I totally agree with him, Patrick, it's quite clear, right? There's no beating around the bush here. Brendan Rodgers doesn't rate Nawrocki as a first-team starter because if he had done, he would have got more of a run of games. He's not been injured all season. Come on. He's missed some games through injury. So he rates Scales higher. Now, I think we're all in agreement. You said the Scales experiment must end. Patrick, I think we're all in agreement. We do need someone to come in at centre-half who can absolutely kind of demand a bit of respect in terms of winning the ball in the air in particular and bring up a kind of standard, maybe not as high as Carragher, but working towards that kind of level. And then you've got a defence you can kind of rely on. You can certainly work with it. If that's the case, and Scales becomes second choice, Patrick, Nawrocki becomes third, and Welsh becomes fourth, and Lagerbielke becomes fifth. And you're thinking, how many of these guys do we need to keep here? Has Nawrocki got a future at Celtic, Patrick? Because if we bring in a centre-half, he's just dropping down the scale by another body.
Yeah, that's the concern, really, especially when you consider the money that we've spent. Lagerbielke, I think he'll be away in the summer. He had 1 foot out the door, 1 foot in a plane in January, and then Brendan phoned them to come back because of the injury crisis. But when it comes to, you've not even mentioned Kobayashi, and I'm sure we'll come on to talk about him, but he's not even in the picture.
We might mention him.
He's actually lower down than Lagerbielke, which is quite impressive. I think those two, whether it's loans or permanent transfers, I don't think they're clearly not going to play a part. So I think they'll be leaving the club in some form. But you hit the nail on the head because, Lagerbielke, I think we paid 3 million for. Hopefully managed to recruit that back. But when it comes to Nawrocki, he appears to be above Welsh, but below Scales. And you're right, if someone else comes in, he's just going to get knocked down the pecking order. And are you really going to sign a guy for close to 5 million, not play him, and then try and punt him the following year, along with a £3 million centre-half? Because, it was a pretty bad window we had, but it's not a great look, and it's not a great way to spend your money. You think guys who come in for that amount of money will come in and play some part. So it is a concern, but what we know for certain is he doesn't like Lagerbielke, he doesn't like Nawrocki, and we need someone better than Scales. So we definitely need someone to come in, someone that can. I think you've seen with Carter Vickers and Starfelt over the 2 years, Starfelt was always the guy, if it was possible, if he was in in close enough proximity, he would go up for the headers and Carter-Vickers would drop back and sort of tidy up like a sweeper. So you need someone probably to go out and win the headers. And obviously that's what we failed on Saturday, and that's what we've been failing on all season.
Yeah.
So you need someone certainly taller than Carter-Vickers. Obviously, it's going to be a struggle, as you say, to find someone of that quality, but decent on the ball, excellent at winning headers, decent enough passer. And I think that's the type of player that we're looking for, really.
Starfelt's a perfect example of you don't know what you've got till it's gone, isn't it? I mean, it's, you know, because he was so dominant in the air and it did make for a great partnership. And those are the things you don't maybe appreciate at the time, because he occasionally looked like he was going to trip over the ball and occasionally did trip over the ball. But what he did, you know, defensively, you know, in terms of those kind of headers to the back post, neither of those goals would have been scored, you know, if Starfelt was there, I don't think. So, you know, it makes a huge difference.
It definitely does, John. And the question we're running with today is around the key areas in this Celtic side that Brendan Rodgers has to really fix for us to ensure that we get through these 6 games if we want to win a double. It's still my ambition. I'm sure it's still the ambition of every Celtic fan. So you're looking at that left back, and as John said there, we don't have a backup. When Brendan Rodgers was asked about it, John, he said that Liam Scales is our backup at left back. I mean, he actually named Liam Scales. Obviously, Mitchell Frame came in for one appearance, never been seen again. So I don't know in terms of his fitness, where he is, if it would be fair on the player. I'm sometimes of the view, though, John, that a young kid can thrive in the big pressure situations at times if they're thrown in, but he seems to be miles off the first team squad. And then the left side of defence, if Scales either goes out to left back or is dropped or injured for any reasons, then you've got a situation where you are playing someone that I don't think Rodgers has got the full faith in. When it comes to Stephen Welsh, I think there's other reasons why he's at the club. He's been given a 4-year deal. Scottish quota is one of them. I think the other aspect of it, I do think you need a core. I think you need a core of players in there, John, that have come through the ranks. Listen, not in a sense of jobs for the boys, but they've got to obviously have ability. But I think having a core of guys like Stephen Welsh, James Forrest, McGregor, Ralston is important to a club like Celtic. So I don't think Welsh is going anywhere.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I like Welsh as a player. You know, I do. Obviously, I'm biased for a number of reasons, but he is a very good footballer. But the one thing he won't do either, he's not dominant in the air. In fact, that's one of possibly his biggest weakness. Mm-hmm. You know, he's not tall and he doesn't dominate in the air. So he doesn't solve the problem that we have. In fact, what he brings to the game is, in my view, just a tidier version than what Liam Scales does. Basically, I think his distribution is very good. I think it's crisp, all that sort of thing. But he obviously prefers Scales for his size. He prefers him because he's a natural lefty. All of these reasons. So, Stephen's a very good player, and if he's happy to be there in the background, that's fine. But as you say, Nerofsky, I mean, £4 million player on the bench. I mean, I thought that was the reason we didn't sign Jens. Because I said at the time, Jens, there's no way we are paying £4 million for a guy to sit on the bench. Mm-hmm. Jens looks like a Rolls Royce player compared to some of our options at the moment.
That was really frustrating looking back, and it actually isn't with hindsight, because I think if you check the shows that I was a fan of Jens, and I think that what I liked about him was he's the variety of passing. He could play long as well. He found the wingers really quickly. He broke the back lines. I've seen Navrosky doing that. But you're right about Scales' distribution, but I do have concerns. We need someone in terms of the aerial prowess, somebody who can win that ball in the air. And like you say, Patrick, the old-fashioned sweeper, Carragher is brilliant at that, and he does it all over the back line. Loads to discuss. Let us know your thoughts on the defensive frailties that have been highlighted once again by 9th-placed Aberdeen as we go in to play against Dundee. Are having a great season, Dundee. They really are. Had a decent result the other week as well. Let's talk about a few of the other aspects. We're going to start off, I'm sorry, in advance, 1,000 of you watching strong, but we need to talk about the referee situation, and I'll tell you why. Because during the week, Patrick, Nottingham Forest made their own statement in relation to certain officials on the VAR who might support another team. and it might actually affect their decision-making process. And it opened up a can of worms because people were saying, oh, wait a minute, how on earth can you bring their allegiance into this? But they did. The guy on VAR supported Luton Town. There's a relegation dogfight on the go, and they suggested that 3 penalties that could and should have been given were not due to this bias. It's interesting how other teams are now bringing this to the fore, Patrick.
Yeah, it is. And the thing that caught my attention was the reaction of Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher just a few hours after the tweet, because I mean, I've not seen the instance. I've seen the tweets, but I've not seen the instance. And I know they lost 2-0 to Everton, and it is a dogfight. And I think this is a good thing. A lot of people might call it embarrassing or reactionary, and Neville and Carragher have their view, but this does need to be called out. I mean, people certainly in that situation. If a Luton fan, Luton are in the relegation zone, I believe they're 18th, and then Everton and Nottingham Forest are directly above them. How can that person be impartial? I mean, we've said it on here. Alan Morrison's detailed it the last couple of months. Unconscious bias exists. We all know it exists.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no way to referee a game fairly when you've got a stake in the game. I think Neville, I think it was, said, you're meant to do it through the proper channels. The manager comes out after the game, makes a statement. He'll get a slap in the wrist from the FA, and then we'll continue as normal. And you think to yourself, well, you've just proven yourself wrong, because nothing happens when that happens. You need to take a different approach.
Absolutely.
And we've seen it up here this season, so many questionable decisions. Obviously, we had the strike, 14 years ago, foreign refs came in. I don't think that's a bad idea. I certainly think we need to have some sort of declaration of which teams these guys support. And there does have to be a different approach to how I mean, VAR comes into it as well, but I think that's a bit of a separate issue. How referees are selected and what sort of repercussions there are for these big mistakes, because they're absolutely massive mistakes, especially in the Premier League. I mean, if you get relegated from the Premier League, if you've signed a couple of guys in big contracts, you're facing serious financial peril if you don't get straight back up. So when there's so much money at stake, I think like other sports, I'm not sure exactly what it's like in rugby and American football, but transcripts of what was said during these incidents, I don't think that's unreasonable. And I think there needs to be a halt to this punishing of managers and clubs for questioning decisions, because I think it's totally fine to question a referee when they've made a mistake. How can you not question the integrity of someone who's made a mistake? The idea that they don't make mistakes is also ludicrous. So I think there needs to be a different way of tackling this, because as Gary Neville outlined, they've not gone about it in the usual way, but the usual way doesn't work, because these mistakes keep occurring and these referees aren't punished or demoted for their mistakes. So there needs to be a different process for selection, review, training. I think there needs to be a whole new approach to refereeing, and I think clubs are coming round to this idea.
I think so, and it's refreshing when it happens outside of the Celtic bubble, John, because we're constantly getting told that we're just paranoid, and it is constant, and it blurs everybody's view of the situation, rather than looking at the facts, rather than watching the show that Alan and I did with the Partner of Assistance a few Fridays ago, which has been seen and heard over 35,000 times, and the feedback we got for that was incredible. People are now saying, well, actually, bias does exist, and it's about time people realise that. But incompetence exists as well. The SFA do not have a referee at the moment who is being selected, John, for any major tournament outside of Scotland. And that is a damning indictment on the quality of our referees as well.
Well, I think, was it Lawrence who put it best a number of weeks ago when he basically said, if bias is not a factor, then why do judges have to recuse themselves from cases in which they may have a link? Yeah. It's acknowledged the fact that course bias is a factor, unconscious or conscious. But as Alan also pointed out, incompetence doesn't have a pattern. But where the real incompetence is at the SFA is with the structure of the SFA and the head of the SFA. For instance, you've got your wee man Crawford Allen just now, who's obviously having a high time of it sticking us with every dodgy referee that we've got before he departs the building. So we'll probably get John beaten to the end of the season, in every single game. So, some of the contentions are absolute nonsense. How can you run a system which doesn't acknowledge bias? How can you run? That's like saying, I don't believe the sun comes up in the morning. It's absolute provable nonsense. And to just ignore it, to just blithely ignore, it doesn't happen. No, you're all conspiracy theorists. That's insane. That is insane, and it smacks of people absolutely determined to protect the status quo, because the status quo either protects their jobs or protects their interests in terms of teams. So it cannot be the case that we allow that to continue. It cannot. Because as I say, it's just, oh no, I'm pretty sure night doesn't follow day. What? What are you talking about? How can you say there's no bias? Human beings are what they are. This stuff is provable, has been for hundreds of years pretty much. We know that there's bias. So to allow people to referee games which potentially cost the outcome of which tens of millions rests on. So, the winner of the league this year, 60 million straight off the bat. So that is to allow people who are bad. Where else would you get that? And what other walk of life would you allow people with a vested interest and stopping you getting that money be the people who are adjudicating on the game or sport or business or whatever it is? Who would allow that? It is insane. When you take it outside the football bubble and you take it outside the SFA bubble, it's honestly, you'd need to be in an institution to think it's a good idea. And unfortunately, they are in an institution. It's called the SFA, but they're all provably insane as well. It's just nuts. It really is nuts. And I feel as if I'm, doing a disservice to people who might be nuts or insane. So... But it's so frustrating. How do we allow this to continue? Is it just because, the Rangers really have the whip hand amongst the clubs to the point where no matter what the other clubs want to do, Rangers can just veto that? Is that what's happening here? Because otherwise you would just go outside, as Alan put it, in England, it's an outside resource, and, they are independently recruited, paid, judged, all of this, and that's what it must be. You cannot have it. Even if it's within the SFA, it needs to be an independent body, perhaps answering to the SFA, but the SFA can have no say in it, because they have their own biases as well. And as you said, the fact that our referees are so poor and so provably poor, and their decisions are so provably poor, that they are not considered worthy of games outside the country in any major competitions. That is a humiliating embarrassment.
Yeah.
And that was obviously one of the reasons why Crawford is away back to, spend his spare time with Farquhar. So it's just madness. Anyway, you could go on all day because it drives you to distraction. How this can be allowed, when you look at it objectively, it's insane.
But John, some of the points you're making there, like, people just continually repeating the same thing without looking at the facts, the facts that bias exists. I always go back to this report I read in an early edition of 442 when it was a completely different magazine back in the day, talking about how players, if you didn't like your teammate, you wouldn't pass to them, even if they were in a better position. And they got people who were experts in terms of bias to actually come in and say and try and explain it to punters like you and me, Patrick, who that sounds absurd. You've got two strikers, right? And for some reason, they don't like each other. The example that was used was Andy Cole and Teddy Sheringham did not like each other off the pitch for Manchester United. And they were talking about how actually this could affect their performance on the park. And if Andy Cole's got a great position, Teddy Sheringham's got the ball, he's more likely to pass it to someone who's out of position because he doesn't like that footballer. So biases exist everywhere. Anyone who's had the misfortune, I always see it as a misfortune of doing jury duty. Will know that you sit there, and if you recognise the person who's on, you've got to declare it for obvious reasons. Exactly what John was saying about judges. So yeah, it is. It's really frustrating, but it looks as though they've doubled down, Patrick. And as John says, it would not surprise me if I think there's maybe 20 top flight refs. I think we're probably going to see 2 or 3 of them in the last 5 games refereeing Celtic games.
Yeah, it's a questionable system we've got up here, and as you say, you need to declare these biases in any other walk of life. And I know we all sort of get a bit sort of wrapped up in the world of football, and we sort of see it as a separate entity and different rules apply, but really it isn't that different. Bias does exist in this sphere as well as every other sphere. And as you say, you need to declare it for jury duty. Certainly the company I work for, and I'm sure you've both had this in the past, you need to do unconscious bias training and all these different sort of modules about GDPR. It's part of that sort of learning process when you enter, any sort of workplace or any sort of official capacity. And for whatever reason, the SFA decided that this doesn't exist in Scotland. And obviously there's these different issues when you look at the Forest case of questioning the integrity of referees and how you conduct your business, which I find equally laughable. I mean, the idea that you can't question a decision, I think, is just ridiculous. So I think something does need to change in the way that, certainly in Scotland, how we assess these referees. And I think Alan, I can't remember what it was word for word, but he came away with a great line about how the SFA are in charge of recruitment, training, employing, assigning, marking their own homework, basically.
Yeah.
And when you mark your own homework, you're never going to mark it fairly. And especially if you've been doing it for, 140 years, definitely wrapped up in their own wee bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And they've decided that they're right all the time. So it's not for me. It's something that needs to change. But as John pointed out, it would appear one club has the whip hand over the rest of the league, and they can veto anything. And there doesn't seem to be an appetite for change. I mean, everyone's a victim to these refereeing decisions, apart from one club. But there's no desire to change it by the looks of things. But it is quite laughable when you had that Hearts game. We came out and criticised Beaton, named him in the interview, and then he's appointed for the Derby game, and he's appointed again first game after the split. Luckily, I'm not as anxious as John. I mean, probably because I didn't see the game. I probably saved myself from that anxiety, but
I think
I'm
you
actually,
did,
I'm quietly confident we'll get the league over the line. The big results for Ross County and Dundee, the last 2 weeks, I was confident before that, to be fair, but been playing a lot better, and those results for Dundee and Ross County have given us a bit of a cushion now. And if we win the next 3 league games, it's practically over the line. So hopefully, beating can't have an effect. And I don't know about you two, and I don't know about Dundee, but it's sunny where I am. Sun's splitting the trees. So hopefully, up in Dundee, they'll maybe actually need to be watering the pitch as opposed to trying to.
that would be
drain it.
hilarious.
So
you imagine that?
I'm hoping the pitch is of a better standard and we can play our football.
I'm just, I cannot wait to hear what the selection of music is going to be at half time. I'm reading I'm actually reading the Football Governance Bill, which is transcribed online and will be forevermore available to the public, which means that it's a matter of record. Check it out on the UK Parliament website. Why would I be reading that though, John? What's interesting the last couple of days in Parliament? Anything that came to mind to you, John? Did you hear anything that you thought was quite interesting?
I don't know what you're talking about, mate.
We were informed again with someone with no skin in the game that Glasgow Rangers disappeared forever. And as I say, it was uttered. It was uttered in such a way that it is now recorded and documented on part of the discussion around the Football Governance Bill, which was debated on Tuesday, the 23rd of April, 2024. And the comment was that Glasgow Rangers disappeared forever. So see, when they come out with the West Bromwich and District Chess Champions said that it's the same club, just refer them to the Football Governance Bill. in the transcript, Patrick. I thought it was hilarious. It was shared by Tam Selleck, and obviously it went viral after that.
Who made the comment though?
I'm just trying to get the name of the guy who made the comment, John. It's all there. It's all transcribed, but it's about, I don't know, 200,000 words, and I was scanning through it there. I will check it out because he's obviously, there's going to have to be a CSC named after him, I would suggest. But yeah, check it out, John, if you've not seen it. It's something of a giggle. Now, you said
Toby Perkins of Chesterfield. He's a Labour MP. So Toby Perkins for Prime Minister, please.
Toby Perkins, if you're tuning in, you are getting the Tim of the Week. Well done. That's just something we've made up today, and we'll probably never hand it out ever again. John, now, with regards to that, we had a wee chat, Lawrence and I, about how people are so fixed in their ideas of counting trophies these days. I can never remember that growing up. But it was pointed out to us by an avid Acsom viewer that if we are to win the double, we would be in a situation, John, whereby we would have won 118 trophies, which is a record equaling amount if you were to add up all the trophies that both Rangers have won over their histories. And you and I both agreed before coming on, that's never really been important, other than for one reason, John. What would that reason be?
Well, that reason B is to deprive them of any claim to any sort of glory, even though the nonsense of, counting trophies over two different clubs. What's that about? That's just bizarre.
It is.
It's like, can we count trophies for other clubs? Do you know what I mean? Because if we count Aberdeen's trophies, do we already win? Do you know what I mean? It's absolute nonsense. They are two separate entities. So Toby Perkins pointed that out, I think, quite rightly. So whatever claim they make is always nonsense. However, what you would like to do is take that nonsense claim and remove it from their ability to repeat it as if it's a fact. The most successful club in the world and all that garbage. Just absolute. You wonder, that's when you know that you're absolutely desperate for success and you haven't had any in a long time, because clinging on to those things. Oh, we've got X number of trophies, most successful club in the world. Who thinks that apart from you? Do you know what I mean? Absolutely nobody. You ain't even round the world and said who's the most successful club in the world. They'd all be like, oh, that would be the Rangers, the old Rangers. I don't know about the new Rangers, but
I just can't wait to see the big board lying beside the skip next to Ibrox that's got the decal on it. The world's most successful club, and it's lying there next to the old firm banner. Yeah. It's like saying Ronaldo has won, 206 caps for Portugal and 98 caps for Brazil, and it's one and the same. I mean, it really is. It's getting to the point, though, John, that yesterday when that video went around, what was his name? Toby Perkins, did you say? Tim of the Week, Acsom's Tim of the Week, yeah. When someone else comes out of nowhere, out of left field and says it, it's like throwing a grenade and running away. And it is actually quite hilarious.
Do you know what? My son-in-law sent me the Paddy Power video they did the other day of the guy who wouldn't let anyone away with saying old for him. Right? And he's just, Who
did that remind you of, John?
According to my son-in-law, it reminds him very much of me. And in fact, not just last week, he did it again, and I corrected him. I wouldn't let anyone away with saying it. Not in my presence. I wouldn't let anyone away with saying it. I know it was supposed to be funny, and it is funny, but I'm still quite happy to take the heat for it. I will not have it said in my presence and just let it go. I don't care. But it was Paddy Power as usual, getting to the heart of things. It's very, very amusing.
But John, see the thing with that, right? It is amusing, and it's even amusing when they're poking fun at us. We find that amusing. That self-deprecating humour. I'm all over it, but it really gets their wick up. It really does. Like on the other side, they can't handle humour. They can't handle a bit of banter, patter, crack, whatever you want to call it. Stephen Sloan, I reckon it is about 20 refs in the Scottish Premiership. Why do we keep getting the same referee? It doesn't make any sense. Why are those 20 refs not sharing Celtic and Rangers? Well, I think John has explained exactly why that is happening. Patrick, I want to talk about all that dough, but where will it go? Celtic are on the cusp of being absolutely wadded, more so than at any other point in the club's history. We are not a bank. A lot of that money came from the fans. What are we going to do with it? Are we going to change our recruitment strategy? Is that going to change? What do you think?
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, something needs to change from the last 2 years and the last 4 windows because it's not been good enough. Obviously, Mark Lawwell, I'm unsure if he's actually left yet or like he's serving his notice till the end of the season. Hopefully he's out the door already because I don't want him planning this window. That would be terrible.
Yep.
That would be a terrible parting gift. But I think there needs. I think most football clubs have someone in that role, some sort of head of recruitment, head of football. And we need to, unlike every other job going at Lennoxtown, I think we need to actually try and recruit the best candidate as opposed to giving it to some former player, or someone's son, whichever one we prefer these days, or an agent's recommendation, one of the three. No, we need to get the best guy for the job in that role. And, the way modern football is, we need to spend some of that money. There is no point, especially, I mean, the last 2 years, we're living through inflationary times. There's no point hoarding cash when inflation's through the roof. I mean, it doesn't make any economic sense. So we need to either invest in infrastructure, invest in the club, or invest in the team. There's no point in sitting with that much cash in the bank. Nothing catastrophic that size is going to happen. I mean, I just done some quick sums. I think we had 67 million on the 31st of December. If you take away some money for Barrafield and wages, say £1 million a week, you're still at like 50 million quid. When you look towards the summer, if we win the league, you've got 50, 60 million for the Champions League, 30 for season tickets. And I think the consensus is that O'Reilly's going to leave for a record fee. I mean, it takes you up to well over 100 million. Obviously, wages will come off, transfer fees will come off. We're hopefully going to buy a few players, but we're going to bring in 100 million in the next couple of months. So we need to go out, we need to spend that money. Whether they want to sort of redevelop the main stand, finally build a hotel/museum, maybe improve Lennoxtown somewhat, or maybe buy a few defenders. Because I think we need wingers. I think we need a centre half, a left back, definitely a goalkeeper, a replacement for O'Reilly. So we need a good couple of players, and I don't like this sitting on 60, 70 million quid. I think we need to be investing that in either the ground or the training facilities or something.
Well, the thing is, Patrick, Kevin Graham wants Lennoxtown to look better from above. He wants it to look better from a bird's eye view. I'm not sure how we do that. The stadium could be doing with quite a wee bit of work. It's obviously now we're at that stage where it's about 30 years old now. The redeveloped area is Celtic Park. We've got the Celtic Way, which looks brilliant. The walkway, brilliant. But you look at that superstore, the ticket office, that kind of thing. A big complex there would be phenomenal. But there's also, money for Abada, money for Frimpong. We're going to have a lot of options, John. And my kind of take on this is an opportunity. There's probably been many in the past, but this really is an opportunity to do something a wee bit different, John. And look at the recruitment, for example, and say, right, what if we were to buy in between half a dozen and 8 players of value, of quality? Yes, we might have to pay 5 or 6 million quid for them, which in today's market isn't a great deal. It is for Celtic. Do you think we are prepared to do that? Or am I just shouting at the clouds at the moment because it's the same board making the same decisions?
If they do it, it'll be the first time that they've taken the decisions like that since Peter Lawwell was initially in charge.
Mm-hmm.
So Martin O'Neill was the last one to get any money, wasn't he? So, first of all, in terms of infrastructure, I mean, the stadium needs updating, but imagine you were on the other side of the city and you needed a new stadium, and then you look at Tottenham Stadium, which seats 62,000, I believe. Initial projections were 300 million, and it finished at 1.02 billion. Right, it's how much it cost them to build that, and there's massive inflationary factors in building costs as well. So anyone who's been involved in that knows about people doing self builds here, because mortgages is part of what I do, and the cost is through the roof. So, like pretty much everything else, inflationary pressures. But there's a big difference between having to update and having to rebuild, because Castle Grayskull, I can't remember if that's the right one. Is it Snake Mountain or Castle Grayskull? Snake Mountain, thank you.
Just think Alan McCoy's Snake Mountain. That's how to remember it, right?
But I would say Mordor, we'll stick with Mordor. So, but Mordor needs knocked down to the ground. There's no revamping that. You know, I know the structural engineers have looked at it, and there's no revamping that. So, you know, we have an inbuilt advantage of 10 to 15,000 seats, which is not going to stop. But we do need, I mean, the areas around the stadium need updated, the facilities need updated, it needs to be a better experience. So you have all that money, you can do all that. But most importantly, on the pitch, are we going to step away from the model, which we've already established multiple times, did not work and has not worked? And the idea is okay, but not with the strict enforcement as young Lowell tried to implement, because it's just a nonsense. The only decent players we've had in the last few years were people that did not fit that model, for the most part. So, it's okay to say we want young players, we want to develop them, want to send them on. Well, in that case, we need a proper scouting system. We are still, as far as I'm aware, the only trading club without their own fairly advanced scouting network. And if we have one, could you tell us what it is, please? Because why is the structure of the football department completely opaque? Why did, when that boy handed in his resignation along with Lowell, did all of us go, who is that? You know, the first time we ever heard of the guy is when he resigned. Yeah. So, doing press releases that nobody sees, so is the structure. Why can't we know what the structure in the football department is? It's like trying to keep the team a secret. It's an absolute nonsense. Show us what the structure is. Explain to us how this is working. Explain to us what the process is. How are we scouting players now? Where are they coming from? Is it all just going to be now that Lowell's out the door, is it just going to be Brendan getting phone calls from agents like it was with Ida? Is that what's going to happen? Are the Dahans of the world going to be back in just pawning off all their spare players? So explain to me what the structure is that we're building here. That's the first thing I want to know. And then explain how we're going to recruit players, and then explain what is the budget, because you cannot be sitting with 50 million cash on hand, potentially another 60 million to come, potentially the money for, as you say, Matt O'Reilly, Frimpong, Hatate, Abada, all of that. So you're talking there, you're on to 150 odd million, if not more, right? You cannot be sitting with that cash on hand saying to people, I know they need to be under £3 million, they need to be under the age of 23, they can't be on more than 15 grand a week. Are you kidding? That is not viable. It's not believable. It doesn't make sense for the club. And as I've always said as well, the thing that drives me to distraction is when we do sell these guys on, we reset back to zero. We don't build on it.
Yeah. Which
is why we have all this money in the bank, because we don't build on the success that we do have. It's mad. What are we banking the money for? I know we're a business, but what business are you telling me, other than the shareholders, who's going to be happy with that? And given that the majority of the shareholders are fans, do you think they're going to be happy that they're getting an extra few quid because there's these massive cash reserves? It doesn't make sense. So, should they change completely everything that they're doing? Yes, they should. Mm-hmm. Are they going to? It's been 20 odd years since they did. So, it depends whether you believe in miracles or you believe in Michael Nicholson. But one way or another, there needs to be a massive sea change in attitude and approach and structure and system and delivery. Apart from that, don't need to do much.
The thing is, John, right, there are moments where they build you up, right? So the last moment I got, and I totally agree with you, we've not done it since O'Neill, and after O'Neill, we really had to cash in all our chips and do things differently the other way. But there was that moment where we were sitting here in the pre-season, 2 pre-seasons ago, and we were talking about, right, will we sign Jota or Carragher? Because we didn't think the club were ambitious enough to bring them both of them in permanently. And we went and done it. What was the result of that? Well, we absolutely scooshed domestic football and won a treble. And we were all looking forward to the Champions League this season because you're thinking, well, we could do that again. We could bring in another 2 players at that level of quality and build on it, like John says, build on it, and actually look forward to the Champions League and look at your squad and say, how many guys have we got that can actually play at this level? I don't mean boss it, Patrick, but play at this level comfortably. Add another couple and do it every pre-season and build on it. But we went backwards and we regressed dreadfully in that summer transfer window. So I'm throwing it out there, Patrick. I'm not throwing it out there because I believe we're going to do it. I think we should do it. But like John, I've got my reservations. I think we're very, very cautious when it comes to scenarios where you've got an open goal, you've got a penalty kick, and you just think, no, we'll just protect the ball. We won't do that. We won't move forward. What do you think is going to happen, Patrick?
Well, the last 20 years we've squandered positions of strength repeatedly. You look back to, you can look back to, throughout Lawwell's tenure, we probably in 2008, 2009, we sign a striker and things work out differently. 2016, we have such an advantage. And over the course of 3-4 years, we totally throw it away. With Ange, we had such an advantage. And, we all spoke here about, I think it was May or June, going into that third season, you really kick on. O'Neill got to Seville in his third season. Obviously, Ange leaves, but you bring in a manager of similar quality, in my opinion. And you really look to push on. And we seem totally incapable of doing this. And it's as if, like what John says, we're afraid to make this next step. We're afraid to sign that slightly higher quality player. And I think what must be the board's thinking is that if we don't make the Champions League, we actually can't afford to sustain having these guys on the books because their wages will be too high. So let's not even bother. Let's not even bother signing top quality players because we might not get through a qualifier in 2 years' time, which is an incredibly negative way to view a business that you're running, in my opinion. But I think that shows the disconnect. We're all sitting here ambitious, wanting to take the next step, and they're behind the scenes, keeping things behind closed doors, opaque. And it comes back to the sort of customer relationship. As you pointed out, a lot of that money sitting there is from fans, but they treat us as customers. We're now releasing 4 strips a season. It used to be 1 every 2 years. It's now 4 a season. Tickets are sky high. I mean, the 4-match package for the Champions League will probably come to about £200, I imagine. Season tickets will probably go up. And, there is inflation and they obviously need to run a successful business, but they do treat us as customers. And I think, personally, that's why they're basically hiding the structure of the club. They don't seem to have any plan that's public. We don't really know what their next move is. We don't know who's replacing Mark Lawwell. And I think things need to change. I think we need to have a plan in place, and we can't keep on relying on, as you both said, phone calls to Brendan Rodgers in the 11th hour for players. And I think you highlighted a few months ago, Paul, the relationship between Starfelt, Haksabanovic and Abelgard, who all share the same agent. Yeah. And I think that's a pattern that's followed several different players at the club. Duda Dahan has given us a few decent players, but the vast majority have been quite poor. When you look at the Japan and South Korean market, you start off with players that Ange knew personally, who hit the ground running and were really good. It would appear we've sent our own guys over there, and you've ended up with Kobayashi, Oh, Yang, guys who Ideguchi was Ange's buy, to be fair, but you've ended up with guys who Ange didn't know personally and have failed. And it's as soon as we get our guys involved that these things fall apart. And Starfelt, goodbye. So we've went to the same agent, and we've got 2 duds. So I mean, there needs to be a root and branch sort of investigation into how we do our business in terms of recruitment, and I think it needs to be more public because the ownership versus customer relationship that the board seem happy to use to harvest money from us every season, I think it will get quite tiresome over the course of the next couple of years if we don't progress as a football club.
But there's the point you're making there, Patrick, is, why is there that negative attitude? Why is there, we're going to store this money away in case something goes wrong in 5 years' time? The reason is because that Lowell approach has infected the club. It's an accountant's way of thinking, not an entrepreneur's way of thinking, not a businessman's way of thinking, an accountant's way of thinking. Store all the money, put it in a cave, let me take my bonuses. It's not the way of you have no vision and you have no belief. So it's a completely different attitude from anyone who runs their own business, big, small, or, you have the confidence, you're trying to expand, you're trying to do better. You don't just stack up money and rest on your laurels. That is not the attitude that we need to progress, because it's not a progressive attitude.
No, you're right, John. You're spot on, actually. Stephen Donnelly, are we ever going to improve on a European level if we keep promoting within? Next, we will have the kit man on the bench motivating. No, he's not allowed to do that, Stephen. He's not allowed to talk to the players either before extra time. Henrik Larson, even Andrew's recruitment was probably a fluke, an anomaly. A very welcome one, though. I think what happened there, Henrik, is, if that is your name, is that he signed some of his own players, but there was a lot of duds as well. When you look back, there was a lot of duds, actually, with hindsight. Some of them are now, obviously, part of the weekly car share update. And it used to be James McCarthy and Kobayashi and Segrist sharing a car to training and the games and never arriving. They've taken out the car seat out at the back, John, and now O has joined them in the weekly car share. I mean, 60 grand a week down the Swanee.
Yeah,
I don't even know if some of them are training. You never see Kobayashi or McCarthy on the training pitch.
The point of even the point of that, you're right. I mean, Ange, it was a fluke, and it was a fluke that he got as many good ones as he did.
Yeah,
there was guys there that managed to see us through. But the reason why he had to do that is because we were left, because of this board and the former chairman, we were left without a team. We basically had nothing but young boys and a couple of guys that had been here for a while, but there wasn't a team there. So Ange had to do an incredible bit of surgery as quickly as possible and got us back to winning ways. If Brendan had taken over that team, in my view, or your man, what was the boy, that Newcastle boy,
Eddie Howe.
Eddie Howe. If they'd taken over that team, I reckon we would have been pummeled that season. Because we started from such a low point. But the thing about it is, we're looking at that potentially again now. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at this team with a view, as you say, with one eye to the Champions League or Europe, anywhere in Europe, and not just we need to buy players that can compete in the Premiership. If you look who is good enough to compete in Europe at a decent level, that is a massive rebuild. 9 players would be the least of it, and the amount of people you need to move on. Who can we move them on now? Because the 5-year contracts everyone and their granny was getting, so it's a huge job, a massive job, and that's why I doubt it's going to happen anywhere near to the level we need it to, because it's a huge undertaking, and I don't think, as I've said, I don't think they've got the testicular fortitude for it. I don't think they have the courage for it. I don't think they think it could be done in time. It's going to require a lot of bravery and major surgery, and I'm not sure they're up for either.
No, I agree with that, John. I just think we're overcautious. And that Ange thing as well, you've got to remember, he came in that period when Peter Lowell was not in the building. And obviously there was a different approach for a period when it came to recruitment. Eventually, I think that ran its course as well, and saw the writing was on the wall. The vultures were circling, and he obviously went down to that £1.2 million or £1 billion stadium, John. It does look pretty cool, though, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Albeit quite expensive. Patrick, you're not going to be back on the show before the weekend. What's your feelings? St Mirren versus Rangers, Dundee versus Celtic. Celtic will be playing after, of course, we have found out the outcome of the Rangers result. It is now one eye on the other result and then concentrating on ours. How do you see it going this weekend?
I think both teams will win, if I'm being honest. I think Rangers are at home. Am I right in saying that?
Are they?
I believe
I might have got that wrong.
No, I've got them down as away.
All right, okay. Maybe a tougher game then. Can we really hope for another Brucey bonus, as I called it last week? I really hope so, but I don't think so. No, I do think both teams will win relatively comfortably. I don't think they'll be classic games, but maybe a 2-1 victory for them, and I don't know, 2 or 3 for us. I think we'll keep a clean sheet. I think I wouldn't say we're, I think that semi-final really did sum up our season. It's been up and down throughout. It's been entertaining, but I think we'll get there in the end. Yeah, 2 or 3-0 at the weekend. I'll go for 3-0 at the pitches in a more respectable manner for everyone involved.
The sprinklers are on. The thing is, John, every now and again, sometimes you need to get a bad game out your system. Hearts, obviously, there was other aspects to that, but we got it out our system. Other than that, we've been on a very, very good run. I'm looking at that Aberdeen game. I'm trying to remain very optimistic and say, you know what, we've got that out our system. I'd have rather a 2-2 in a cup where we've got extra time and penalties to win the game than a 2-2 in the league right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, Dundee are on, since we pummeled them, they've had 2 wins, 2 draws, 1 loss. One of the draws, obviously, includes Rangers. So they're on a decent run. How confident am I? I don't know. I think the most important Celtic player this weekend might be Kwon. And see what he does for St Mirren. But, I think if we play to our capabilities, I don't think they can play anywhere near us. But, my concern is that what Aberdeen did has given people ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you have to be able to execute it also. And you also have to be playing with a sort of cup final attitude. And as much as we've got nothing to lose here, would Aberdeen have played us that way in the league? I don't think so. Maybe it's just a mentality thing. But I mean, I'm sure, I hope that it gave our guys a bit of a fright, and they are refocused and back up for it. Because, as I said, I was sentimental, but I was certainly hoping that Joe Hart finishes this year with a glorious double. But then you're swiftly reminded and brought back down to earth by the likes of that Coventry result, that sport does not hand out glorious moments. Mm-hmm. Sport is not sentimental on the field of play. And so it can all just as quickly be torn away from you. However, I'm going to remain confident, and despite what I said earlier, I'm anxious but confident we can get it done. There's 5 games in this league. Can we get it over the line in 5 games? You've got to believe that we can.
You've got to, John. You're right. And by the way, we have found someone who has agreed with me. So I'm bringing their comment up. Thanks for agreeing with me. My man since thought that CCV had a good game. I'm just leaving it there. Leaving it there, gentlemen. 2 against 2. Right. Thank you. 1,250 of you for tuning in on a Wednesday afternoon. It's always an absolute pleasure to be speaking Celtic with these 2 gentlemen. Join us again tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. And thank you to Patrick McGilp and John Hughes for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Hail, hail.